Hey guys, I was requested to make a bit longer video. I think a good video would be to discuss what primitive means and primordial, that kind of nomenclature. And I had made a blog post on September 23rd of this year. I printed it out here. It says, "Stars are genuinely primitive worlds. Stars are life-forming machines." Stellar metamorphosis. I have written, "Stars are life-forming machines. Stars are primitive worlds." I like the primitive world statement, as it is popular to think primitive world in our culture as being like this. So you have, this is a painting, Primitive World by Adolphe Francois Panamaker in 1857. I don't know if you guys can see that very well. If you'll notice, they have it as a primitive world. It has dinosaurs, early looking plants, volcanoes, a lot of fire. You have gliding animals in there, like the I don't know what that looks like, kind of like a little rat type creature. I don't know if you can see that right up here. I'll link this to the bottom so you can see it too. But this is one of the very first paintings of what was considered to be a primitive world, which in 1857 was, it was very centered among the religious people that the Earth was, 6,000 years old, and the humans have always been here, or that we lived among the dinosaurs. Like there's one picture of Jesus riding a Tyrannosaurus Rex, I think. I thought it was really kind of funny, But I guess that would be common. But this is one of the earliest primitive worlds here, and it was considered, really bad to think of the Earth as existing before human beings were here. And it was also really bad of thinking of Earth as being, older than 6,000 years. So I guess this is a good step in the right direction. A primitive world would be, millions of years ago to these people. But then we move into the 21st century and we learn that being primitive is somewhat different than what they expected it to be. It's a lot more in depth. Primitive, and by the use of that word I mean early in the history of the world or humankind, or being the first or earliest of the kind or in existence. As well, I guess you could use the word primordial, meaning pertaining to or existing at or from the very beginning, primordial matter. And if we want to look at Earth as its actual primitive or primordial state, we have to look back in time to when it was very hot, very bright, and had lots of mass. It was very, very turbulent, very, very energetic, and very big. And we can actually, see these primitive worlds in the night sky and even during the day. If you don't look at the sun, but you can feel it on your skin. That's a primitive world. That's what the Earth looked like many billions of years ago. So what this is all leading to is that to understand what a genuinely primitive world is, you have to kind of look at the worldview of what scientists and paleontologists think is primitive, and then kind of ignore them in a way, because to get to the really primitive nature of stars themselves, you have to go way back in time, before there was even a chance to even form a fossil record. And the reason why this isn't a good presentation of a primitive world with regards to stars is that there's a crust, there's water. Let's see, what else do I have written here? There's land above the water. The crust is already above the surface water. There are extremely complex organisms growing, walking, and even flying or gliding around. And it is also cold enough to host gaseous oxygen, which is breathable air. Primitive worlds are too hot to have diatomic oxygen gas. There aren't extremely complex organisms growing on the sun. No way, it's too hot. Everything would be incinerated immediately. There's land above the water in this primitive world picture. In the sun, there is no land. It's it's plasmatic. It hasn't cooled down enough. It's far, far, far too early to have formed water, where oxygen combines with the hydrogen to make water in large amounts. And then also I have here the Pleiades cluster. Here's a picture of some primitive worlds. Merope is circled. I have it circled in red. But basically, we have a very different worldview here that I struggle with on a daily basis. To look at the stars as young, hot worlds. Entire worlds that have yet to form the life. That have yet to form the oceans. To have yet to evolve to a state that we're so familiar with on the earth. That is very difficult for me to grasp. Even though, I'm one of the main theory developers, because it's so unnatural to me to think in terms of billions of years. My mind, I can't really comprehend those enormous amounts of time. Just comprehending like 100 years is a hard go. And then, human evolution, what, like 2 to 7 million years of that from, more ape-like creatures. To imagine how old the earth actually is means you sort of remove yourself from your daily experience, and that by itself is very difficult. And I can honestly see why a lot of astronomers would have a problem with this, because of how deep time is involved. And even geologists, I can see how they would have a problem with it, because it exceeds their acceptance of how old the earth is, because the earth is older than the very rocks it's composed of. It took time to make the rocks themselves. So to say the rock is the beginning of the earth and then go from there is to miss before the earth even had rocks to begin with. And that is the whole point, is that we need to have a more comprehensive understanding of the stars and to understand their actual past. And to understand their past, we have to redefine the very words we use, and we have to give more of a worldview that allows us to look at them in a new way. But a lot of the times, the astronomers, they're very narrow-minded. So you have to kind of like, hey, open your brain a little bit, But it's very difficult to do stuff like that these days. Alright guys, I think I made this long enough. I'll go ahead and link this to the bottom of the page.